Good afternoon, everybody. Okay.
All right. Okay, we'll start now with Nick's presentation.
Right. So, I came to this in a roundabout way. I started with a solution. I was looking at what happened in my college, and I'm coming at it from a different perspective. I'm a senior manager, vice principal, not a teacher as such. So my reasons for doing things are far more strategic, and I'm looking at a whole college, all staff approach. I wanted to tie in together our professional development, training, ongoing CPD, etc., performance management, and our observation system. And our observation system has developed and has significantly benefited from being involved in joint practice development activities with peer colleges. And the lessons learned from that I've incorporated and changed our practice. And I wanted to take that further. And it was occurring to me that I was thinking about the solution without having any real understanding of the situation, if there was a problem or not. So I thought I'd better find out what the situation is and applied to join the research development project. I spoke to Matt O'Leary, who did the report on observation for UCU. He was very helpful. I pinched a lot of his survey methodology, which I was very grateful for. And this is the outcome. I didn't know what the answers were going to be, and I didn't know what the scale of response was going to be. It's been quite useful. It's not enough. I haven't got the tens of thousands that Matt had. So the deeper analysis, the size of the proportions, etc., aren't large enough to draw any truly meaningful conclusions from. But I've got sufficient data to come up with some interesting results. So this looks like a very confusing graph. Basically, all you have to do is tell the difference between blue and red. The blue activities are the ones that people are directed to take part in terms of CPD. So that's things like typically in-house training and staff conference, very, very high. So over 90%. Other things, in-house training delivered by external training or training organisation. So that sort of thing, and online training organised by your employer. Those really stick out as that's what you have to do. That's quite interesting. The ones that people have self-nominated, taken part in proactively, things like external conference, external training, higher education, further qualifications, those sorts of things. Very much led by the individual, not directed by the organisation. So that's an interesting factor. The other thing that came out that I was actually surprised by was this, and that's that managers have more CPD than teachers, and they put themselves forward for it. They're less directed than teachers. So that I was quite intrigued by that, and that begged a question for me really, which I can't answer, but I'll give it to Trish and she can encourage someone to have a go, which is that a characteristic of the role of a manager or a trait of the people who become managers? So that's an interesting question. Is that an indicator of potential management? Those people who wish to participate in training, who put themselves forward, who nominate themselves, are they the people who are going to percolate through the organisation into management, senior management roles? Right, so that was quite a surprising finding. The other thing that surprised me is that the majority of teaching staff CPD is directed. More of it they are told to do than opt for themselves. And in terms of what we've been talking about today and listening to the presentations this morning around professional development and professional formation, that's quite interesting, that teachers are less proactive. In some ways I'm a little disappointed by that, and it's something that I will take account of. when I'm working with my teachers, and I already have. We're having a staff conference in September, and what I've done is given all the staff a list of all the things they might like to participate in and room to add their own, and they will determine the programme of the conference. So it'll be a democratic way of doing it, not top down. I want them to say what it is they would like to receive professional development, what activities, what interests them. And so turn the scales, encourage them to be more proactive in this area. This is also quite interesting. The green on these on the headings represents what people didn't take part in, the proportion. So things like external conference, teaching staff, just over a third actually participated. Half of those were directed, and 6 were self-nominated. External training, similar situation. HE, very little, majority not participating. And other things, mentoring, coaching, very low participation rates. So those sorts of things. The staff conference, obviously very high again. Very few people managed to avoid that. So, an interesting picture. That's the teaching staff, and you'll notice that for teaching staff, as the previous graph showed, the majority of it is directed. Managers, however, we get a very, very different picture. Almost 80% have participated in an external conference. Vast majority of those self-nominated. They've applied to be part of it. Same with the external training and HE, although still a low participation rate in HE whilst in service. Staff conference, again, quite popular. Everyone feels they're done, or the majority feel they're directed to do it. But a few other interesting things crop up. The peer subject networks, actually very popular amongst managers, and they're proactively involved. So that was an interesting outcome. I didn't realise that. So that's something I will seek to encourage. How do they engage in performance management? Well, 98% of teachers have it done to them in some form or other. For managers, it's under 80%. So there's over a fifth of managers who don't participate in any form of performance management. They're not in appraisal, etc., etc. So that was a very interesting finding. I was quite surprised at that. I haven't worked in an organisation where that's been true. But for teachers, it's de rigueur. So obviously the Ofsted, a rigorous performance management quote, still in the new inspection framework, I'm afraid, in the handbook. Not that Ofsted are meant to model or dictate what we do. I would encourage you all to become, if you're practitioners, please become an Ofsted inspector and teach them how to do it. Closing date for expression of interest is 5 p.m. tomorrow. It's quite a simple application form, and there's no letter you have to write. It's just a series of what I've done and what I would like to do for Ofsted. So you've got a chance to go back tomorrow and do that. And it's very well paid.
Are you working?
No, not yet. No, I was talking to Lorna Fitzjohn about it though. I know Lorna from past. So teachers, managers, performance management. So as you'd expect, very, very prevalent. That no real surprise. What was slightly disappointing is the high numbers of people, particularly teachers, who have only once or twice a year, annually or biannually, reviews. And that's disappointing. And I suspect the majority of those are annual. I can't say for certain, I don't know, but once or twice a year. Managers are at least 3 times or more a year. So there's a difference. We can see a difference in culture in the way managers and teachers are being treated. And that was quite surprising. This is possibly the most informative slide of the whole thing. Sorry it's very congested. I know you can't read any of it, so I'll explain. So red is disagree, blue is agree. And the statements, if I go from left to right, my professional development is valued, so over 80%, and my professional development is monitored. And this is all respondents. So that's high, that's in the 80s, that's quite encouraging. Although obviously there's a number of organisations, almost a fifth, where the people who work there don't feel that. That's quite a negative message for those organisations. So that there is still a tail on the sort of distribution of how good organisations are, where the perceptions of professional development, training, etc., and the processes that support that are not good. People do not feel valued, and they don't think they're being monitored or looked after. So there is still some poor practice out there. Observation is a driver of my CPD. About just under 70% of people agree with that statement. So there's over 30%, almost a third, who don't agree with that statement. So they don't feel that observation drives their professional development. So that's intuitively, that tells me that's from the organisations that have an Ofsted audit, judge and be damned culture, where it's a measurement and a data gathering exercise, not a professional development or a supportive activity. This is the interesting one and mirrors Matt O'Leary's findings. Observation grades are a reliable measure. Almost 60% disagree, and I would support that. I've read a lot about it, I've participated in lots of discussions and online debates about observation. I'm very much in agreement with Matt and a number of other people who think that grading and that whole culture of assessing and recording is not the purpose of observation. Observation should be about developing skills and dialogue and professional development. And that's something I'm taking forward in my organisation. I'm happy to talk about that, but that would be mission creep. I've got less than 5 minutes. My CPD is part of my performance review. Again, just about 70%. My CPD targets are set for me. That's a 50-50. So some have them set, some don't. And a lot of people think I set my own CPD targets, and that's just over 70%. So there is some proactivity in there. But it's concerning that for a lot of people, they may be dictated to. They're told what the corporate objectives are. This is what we are focusing on. This is going on your performance review, etc., etc. So there are issues. What this has thrown up for me, understanding all of this, is one of the biggest issues underpinning all of this is the value systems that management or organisational cultures have and demonstrate. And I was at one of the research strategic review seminars in November, and that debate came up, and we're talking about that difference in culture between the Ofsted, the audit, the financial things that our speaker was talking about earlier, in terms of that culture that was generated as a result of incorporation, and the sorts of things we've been largely talking about and exploring through the research development programme, in terms of supporting teachers, developing the skills, the resilience and the professional ability to thrive and survive. And a lot of this reflects aspects of that debate. So there are still organisations which are very managerial, spreadsheet management approaches and all those sorts of things, rather than being people and values focused. And learning organisations are people places. Nothing happens if you don't take the people with you. Try doing it without them. It's very, very difficult. Joint practice development, quite a relatively low score. It's a majority, but there's an awful lot who don't understand it, which is quite worrying. Performance management outcomes are used for self-assessment. I don't see that, but I try and read a lot of self-assessment reports because I write them myself. And I used to read them for the LSE a long time ago. And that doesn't feature very often. Nor do CPD outcomes. There may be reference to it, but an awful lot of people, very surprisingly, I didn't think this was so pervasive, believe that those things are collected. The one that does score the most highly is that observation grades are aggregated, because we all know that governors find it very difficult to cope with large numbers, so a little grade profile is perfect. Right, I'll stop there before Tricia asks me to.
You just worried.